They underestimated you in silence. Not because you were weak, but because you didn't react. That's how they test you. The subtle humiliation in public to see if you'll flinch. The compliments with a knife under them. The plans they made without telling you. The way they remembered to forget your name when it was time for credit. That silence wasn't accidental. It was designed. A psychological filter. They wanted to know if you were the kind of person who needs to be seen. The kind who'll fight for a seat at someone else's table. The kind who begs for validation disguised as love, respect, or recognition. And you were. Back then, back when your loyalty was currency, they burned for warmth. Back when you made excuses for why people with no discipline had power over your peace. Back when you thought playing nice would earn you a crown in a room of cowards. But something changed. Not loudly, not publicly. There was no dramatic betrayal. Just the moment you finally stopped answering to your lower self, the one that wanted justice, the one that wanted applause, the one that wanted them to understand. You realized they understood already. That's why they tried to keep you tame, and that's where it began. Quietly, strategically, the transformation they never saw coming. You didn't shout it, you didn't post it, you didn't declare war. You just started playing a different game. Because real revenge, it doesn't look like rage. It doesn't sound like screaming. It looks like becoming untouchable. It sounds like silence when they try to explain. If you're still listening, it's because you've already tasted the disrespect. You've already swallowed the humiliation. You've already burned the part of yourself that needed them to be better. You didn't come here to heal. You came here to win. Subscribe if you understand what that means. If not, this isn't for you. They think you're still playing the same game because you look calm, because you stopped reacting, because you don't chase, don't explain, don't flinch. But the rules you follow now are older than emotion, older than morality, older than them. You're playing by Machiavelli's code, not the watered-down quotes people post when they feel clever, but the real strategy. Cold, relentless, unreadable. You don't seek revenge through fire. Fire burns out. You go cold, because cold makes people panic. Cold is when you smile with no warmth, when you nod but give nothing, when you're present but absent, when you let them talk, knowing they're revealing more than they realize, and you reveal nothing. You didn't disappear. You became dangerous. And that's why they'll come back. They always do. Not because they love you. Not because they've changed. But because they can't feel your need anymore. And that terrifies them. Because control only works when there's a reaction, a weakness, a dependence. Once that's gone, they're left with the truth that they were never powerful, just temporarily convenient. And now they're not even that. You stopped arguing, not because you lost, but because you realized arguments require equality, and you don't argue with pawns when you're playing for the king. You stopped proving your worth, because anyone who makes you prove it doesn't deserve it. You stopped waiting for closure, because silence is its own ending, and you control when the credits roll. Understand this. They don't feel guilt. They feel absence. They don't feel sorry. They feel excluded. They don't feel regret. They feel irrelevant. And that's the part they'll never recover from. Not because you punished them, but because you outgrew them and made sure they knew it. This is your move now. Unapologetic improvement. Relentless focus. Success so cold it feels like a slap. Not for applause. Not for their envy. For clarity. Because the most savage revenge isn't their destruction. It's your evolution without needing to say a word. They thought you'd come back. Not because they believed in you, but because they believed in your need. Need is predictable. Need bends. It explains. It waits. It forgives what should have been a death sentence. And they mistook your silence for the calm before your return. But you weren't silent. You were calculating, measuring their patterns, their tells, the way they smiled too quickly when they won something small, the way they got louder when their lies started to collapse, the way they pretended you were never gone, even though your absence turned their whole ecosystem brittle. You were watching how they'd respond without your energy feeding their illusion. and they responded the same way most people do when they lose their leverage. They panicked, then they pretended, then they blamed you. It's always the same cycle. They destroy the bridge, then get angry you didn't swim back. But here's what they'll never understand, and what you need to tattoo on your instincts. The person who walks away clean never intended to return. There's a difference between distance and escape. You didn't take space. You took the exit, because you saw what they thought you'd never see, that they weren't a partner, they were a parasite. And you were the host. So you stopped feeding them. Not by fighting, not by exposing them, but by becoming precise with your energy, strategic with your time, deadly with your presence. You show up where it counts, speak when it matters, and keep your moves behind a glass wall visible but untouchable. You learned the principle Machiavelli never needed to write down, because those who understand it don't need reminders. Never let a fool think they won. Let them think you're gone. Let them think they're safe. Let them build on sand. And when the wave of your results crashes through their fiction, say nothing. Let them sit in the wreckage of a world they built without you. Because now you build without them. No explanations, no leaks, no apologies. You play for keeps, and the game is just beginning. You want revenge? Fine. Then let's talk about what it actually costs. Not the petty version people fantasize about. Not the dramatic monologues, the social media displays, the public call-outs that feel powerful but solve nothing. That's cheap revenge, the kind that burns fast and leaves you emptier than before. Number. Cold success, the real kind, doesn't start with ambition. It starts with death, the death of the version of you that begged to be understood. The one that thought loyalty would protect you. The one that flinched when they raised their voice, lowered your standards, or laughed when you were honest. You have to kill the part of you that still wants justice, because justice is a craving. Success is a weapon. When you let go of fairness, when you stop waiting for the apology, the explanation, the closure you gain, something they'll never have. Leverage. Because now your moves aren't driven by wounds, they're driven by clarity. Clarity is terrifying to people who manipulate emotions. Clarity is immune to flattery, guilt, threats, and seduction. Clarity doesn't argue. Clarity doesn't explain. Clarity just acts with precision. That's what makes your revenge untouchable. You don't announce it. You don't react to them. You don't even acknowledge them. You just build. Silently, ruthlessly, in full view, until the life they thought you'd never have is the one they're forced to watch from a distance, powerless, bitter, haunted by the version of you they created and couldn't contain. That's the paradox. They thought they were breaking you, but all they did was expose your limits so you could destroy them. Now you operate with surgical control. You don't respond when they provoke you. You don't justify your growth. You don't explain why you don't come around anymore. Because you understand, when power is real, it doesn't defend itself. It just is. So you walk into rooms without shrinking. You take up space without asking. You choose your circle like a sniper. Choose targets slow, quiet, permanent. You build a presence so strong that even your silence becomes a reminder of what they lost. That's revenge. No rage, no scars on display. Just results. And the sound of your name being whispered by people who used to mock it. There's something they'll never admit. Not to you, not to themselves, not even in their quietest moments when no one's watching. They miss the version of you they could manipulate. The one who smiled through the insult, who answered the call, who explained your tone, who believed that empathy meant self-erasure, who gave second chances like candy to people with no teeth to chew it. That version, they adored it, because it made them feel powerful, worshipped, safe. But the moment you stopped bleeding for them, you became cold. That's the word they'll use when they can't control you. Cold. They'll say you changed. You got distant, arrogant, detached. They'll tell people you were never who they thought you were, but you were. You just stopped playing dumb for their comfort. You finally realized they didn't want your love. They wanted your submission, and when you stopped submitting, they called it a betrayal. It wasn't. It was exposure. Because you didn't flip a switch. You didn't snap. You didn't turn evil. You woke up. You saw the patterns. You traced the manipulations backward like scars in reverse. You watched how every time you needed something, they disappeared. And every time they needed something, you were expected to show up as if you owed them your soul. So you stopped showing up, not as punishment, but as a correction. And now they talk about loyalty. From a distance they created. Now they talk about energy while draining everyone else's. Now they talk about peace while their life is war inside every room they enter. Because people like that, they don't actually want peace. They want control disguised as connection. And the moment you cut the string, they call you a villain. Let them create their fiction. Because while they're rewriting the past to save face, you're building a future with no trace of them in it. That's the real revenge. Not that they lost you, that they can't access the person you've become even if they tried. You don't even want revenge anymore. Not the emotional kind. Not the kind that watches the scoreboard, craves the reaction, or waits for the day they say, "You were right." That version of revenge is still about them, still wired to their validation, still hoping they'll wake up, see the damage, and feel what they made you feel. But here's the truth you're finally strong enough to face. They never will. You're dealing with people who don't feel guilt, only loss. And loss doesn't teach the lesson. It just reminds them what they can't touch anymore. That's why silence is louder than screams. Distance is sharper than words. Disinterest, that's fatal. Because once someone no longer believes they can trigger you, they lose all leverage. They become nothing. You didn't destroy them. You just became unreactive. And unreactive people are the most dangerous in any room. Not because they're emotionless, but because they've weaponized discipline. They see everything. They just choose what to engage. You've stepped into that phase now. The phase where your focus is lethal. Where you don't ask for peace, you enforce it. Where you don't seek power, you embody it. Because this isn't about dominance. It's about direction. Every time they underestimated you, you redirected the pain. Every betrayal, rebuilt into precision. Every insult, melted into silence. Every rejection, forged into hunger. You stopped trying to be liked and became undeniable. There's no applause for that, no awards, no gratitude. But there is clarity, and with clarity comes one final truth. They can't win anymore, not because they lost the game, but because you walked off the board. No more reactions, no more access, no more you. You didn't just rise. You disappeared from their ecosystem and took the oxygen with you. There's a moment when the war ends. Not because there's a truce, not because someone surrenders, not because they finally understand what they did to you. It ends because you stop fighting battles beneath your level. That's what cold success is. Not noise, not victory laps, not the urge to show them what they lost. It's restraint. It's when you make more money than they thought you ever would and you don't tell them. It's when you build the body, the business, the mind, the life, and not a single post is made for their attention. It's when you sit in a room filled with noise and say nothing, because the loudest one is always the weakest. That's when the war ends, when your silence becomes sacred, when your success becomes quiet, when your moves stop being about them and start being about you, the real you, the one that was buried beneath the need to be seen. Because that's the addiction, isn't it? Buying seen, buying validated, being chosen. And it cost you years. It cost you self-respect disguised as compromise. It cost you time, energy, opportunities, peace, all spent trying to earn approval from people who couldn't even manage their own emotions. But not anymore. Now, your standards are execution. Now, your boundaries are lethal. Now, your presence is earned, not given. And the ones who come back, the ones who say they miss the old you, what they really miss is the version of you who tolerated their disrespect. That version is dead, and in its place stands someone unreadable. Someone they can't provoke, can't manipulate, can't define. Someone they whisper about because silence makes people invent stories to protect their ego. And in the end, that's all they're left with. Their ego, and the memory of who you used to be. You're gone. You know what the cruelest part is? They don't remember what they did to break you. Not because it wasn't real, not because it wasn't intentional, but because it didn't cost them anything. That's what should keep you cold. The fact that your pain was forgettable, that your silence wasn't noticed until it inconvenienced them, that your absence only mattered when their needs went unmet. You were a function, not a person. You were loyalty without question, support without limit, love without consequence. Until you weren't. And when you finally stopped, they called you selfish. As if survival was selfish. As if reclaiming your dignity was betrayal. That's what manipulators do. They flip the script, reframe the scene, and paint themselves as the victim the moment they lose control. But here's the truth. They'll never speak out loud. They knew exactly who you were. That's why they kept you small. Because they knew. If you ever got serious, if you ever moved in silence, detached from their chaos, and stopped explaining yourself, they were done. They never feared losing you. They feared what you'd become without them. And now that fear is real. Because you're no longer a player in their drama. You're not reacting to their games. You don't need revenge, reconciliation, or recognition. You just keep building. Not loudly, not for show, not for claps, but because your evolution isn't performance. It's necessity. They can't follow you where you're going. Not because you're cruel. Because they're not disciplined. They can't operate without manipulation. Can't connect without control. Can't stand silence without spiraling. And your presence now? It is silence. A walking void they can't fill. A mirror they can't escape. A reminder that you can be everything they said you weren't without them. Let that be enough. Let it be final. Let it be cold. This is where most people fold. Right here, in the quiet after the storm, when there's no more drama to resist. No one left to blame. No narrative to fight against. Just the void and the weight of their own mind. That's when they relapse. They reach back out. Open the door a crack. Entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, things weren't that bad. Because emotional memory is selective. And silence starts to feel like loneliness when you're not used to sovereignty. But you're not most people anymore. You don't fill silence with distractions. You let it sharpen you. You don't fear the void. You use it. Because you've come to understand something the average mind will never grasp. The highest form of power is not domination over others. It's dominion over yourself. No one sees the battle it takes to sit with your own thoughts and not flinch. To resist the urge to explain your evolution. To win. And still say nothing. But that's what makes it real. You're not performing anymore. You're not climbing for applause. You're not dressing your growth up in palatable language to make others comfortable with what they lost. You just are. And that stillness, that's what haunts them now, because they see it in your eyes when they pass you. They hear it in the pause before you respond. They feel it in the delay before you text back if you respond at all. They sense the shift. You've left their orbit. Not emotionally, not socially, energetically. And once your energy leaves, it doesn't come back, because the you that gave freely is gone. The you that explained everything is gone. The you that stayed too long is gone. In its place stands someone surgical, someone precise, someone who understands that cold success isn't the loudest echo. It's the echo they can't stop hearing, even in your silence, especially in your silence. Now they watch. From behind fake smiles and forced confidence, they watch. They won't admit it. They'll act unbothered. They'll even speak your name with indifference like it doesn't pull something tight in their throat. But they're watching, because once you become unshakable, you become unforgettable. They try to replicate your presence with noise, Mimic your moves without understanding your motives. Copy your style, your language, your demeanor, but it doesn't land. Because it isn't about what you do. It's about what you withhold. And they don't know how to operate in restraint. They don't know how to speak with weight because they've never learned how to sit with silence. They don't know how to build quietly because they've never created without applause. They don't know how to dominate a room without volume because they've never mastered themselves. That's what separates you now. Note talent. Note luck. Note opportunity. Discipline. Discipline is why you can sit across from someone who once tried to break you and smile like it never happened. Discipline is why you no longer chase closure, because closure is irrelevant when you're not coming back. Discipline is why you can walk through fire, betrayal, rejection, and still maintain your pace, your tone, your code. Because you've made the internal shift they prayed you'd never make. You've stopped needing. Need is weakness disguised as love. And they knew. The day you stopped needing them, their role in your story ended. So now they watch. And as they watch, they realize. The ultimate revenge wasn't success. It wasn't being right. It wasn't them seeing you win. It was this. You don't care if they do. That's the real kill shot. You didn't just win. You transcended the game. There's no ceremony for this. No applause. No audience. No final confrontation where they admit they were wrong and you get to walk away with poetic justice. That's not how it ends. Because power doesn't need closure. Power is closure. And the real victory? It's in the subtle moments no one else sees. It's the moment you get that text and feel nothing. It's the moment you walk past them and your pulse doesn't spike. It's the moment you hear your name in their mouth and you don't flinch, because it holds no weight. That's what cold success gives you. Emotional sovereignty, complete indifference to noise. And that indifference, it's radioactive. Because nothing disrupts a manipulator's identity more than realizing they no longer have a role in yours. They tried to turn you into a villain when they lost access. Let them. They tried to twist the story. Let them. They tried to pretend you never mattered, but their obsession proves otherwise. You don't have to respond, because every time your name is spoken, every time your energy is referenced, every time they try to mimic your next move, they're revealing something you already accepted. You were never equal players. You were the blueprint. And now? Now you've moved on from blueprints, you're building cathedrals, with people who don't need explanations. In rooms where your presence isn't questioned, on timelines no one sees because not everything sacred is meant to be posted. This is the cost of cold success. You lose the version of you that begged. You lose the audience that needed you soft. You lose the comfort of being liked by those who fear your power. And in exchange, you gain complete detachment from their chaos. That's not isolation, that's clarity. And from here forward, every move you make, they'll feel it in the walls. Because you don't seek revenge anymore. You are the consequence.